Hello, welcome to Kelly's Cults Classics. This is my booktube channel because, as you all probably know, we're basically all under quarantine right now because of coronavirus, COVID-19. So I thought, what a better thing to do to distract myself than start a booktube channel. We'll see how this goes. Because I think we all need a little bit more happiness in the world right now, and I find my source of happiness in books. I love books. So I thought I would spread that joy of reading to other people, potentially, other book lovers. So these first two videos that I'm gonna do are gonna be basically the books that I'm reading during quarantine. I'm gonna do it in two parts. I already have some books under my belt. And then the part two will be the books that I'm going to read. Now, this booktube channel I've been thinking about doing for a while, and I wanted to do like cult classic books, like books that are really popular throughout time. They may not be like your usual classical books, but they're books from, you know, way back when to today that kind of became instant like social classics. These two episodes aren't gonna have too many of those just because it's gonna be the books that I'm actually reading, and not all of them are classics. Some of them are pretty obscure, I would think. I have a wide reading range, which is why I chose like doing cult classics. Cult classics goes across genres, across decades, but I also read not cult classics. So this is like what I'm really reading right now and what we have to work with. So I'm just gonna go through the books, and kind of the first set of books I've already read, as I've said, and I'm just gonna go through them and kind of talk about what book they are, how would I like it, and who would I recommend it to. So let's get distracted. So the first book I read during quarantine was actually started before I stopped going to work, so I would read it on the train. I think I got like about halfway through on the train, and then all this happened and I finished it in like a couple days. But that is Race Against Time by Jerry Mitchell. This is a nonfiction book, so it was actually published this year, so it's super new. It's nonfiction, and I really like this book. Basically, it's about a reporter. So his name, Jerry Mitchell, is the reporter. So Jerry Mitchell is writing this, and he did everything in this book. He's a reporter, and it starts back in the 80s, and I think he's based in Mississippi. And basically what it's about is he's reinvestigating cold cases that from like the civil rights era that were perpetrated by the KKK or just white nationalists or racist, and he's trying to help gather evidence so that they can be retried, and so that the people affected by these crimes can finally have their justice. So the four cases he covers in this book are the first one also is like the last one, he splits it up, is the murders of James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner. So they were three civil rights activists who were murdered by a bunch of like 20 KKK members, and their bodies were hidden, and it took a while to find them. And basically, like, some people were charged with like crimes against civil liberties or something, but no one was ever charged for their murder. So that's one, and he goes back and investigates, and all of these cases, they do eventually end up trying someone and finding them guilty, which I think is amazing and fantastic. Several decades late. The second one is Medgar Evers. So he was a civil rights leader who was assassinated outside his house. Then we have Vernon Dahmer Sr. His murder when the KKK burned down his family's home, and he died of like smoke inhalation. It's really sad. And then one of the saddest civil rights era killings that I think is the bombing of the church that killed the four girls, like the four Sunday school girls. Since I was in like 8th grade and I learned about it, I always thought that one was just so terrible and sad because they were just four little girls. Don't hate people, don't be racist. Anyway, so I definitely would recommend this to anyone who likes nonfiction, civil rights issues. There's a lot of legal stuff and investigative journalism. history, any history surrounding the civil rights era. It's just very informative, and I think the author does a great job of showing how the white nationalism we see today isn't new, and how it has roots in the KKK, and making the case that like the KKK and other white nationalist groups from that period are really terrorists, and they were domestic terrorists, and it shows the continuation of how today we still have troubles with white nationalists. So recommend. It's a sad read, a very sad read, but good. The second book I read, which one was second? This one, The Haunting of Maddie Clare by Simone St. James. So Simone St. James is just an author I read for fun. She has just very fun, like my perfect fun book is by Simone St. James, and basically her books always generally take place in the 20s, so I love the historical vibe. Can't tell I like history. Always has kind of like a spunky female lead, there's ghosts, there's like murders. I love it, and there's like a little romance sprinkled in. Everything I love in a book, she always includes. The plots are sometimes predictable, like I usually can tell who did it pretty early on. But I still have a lot of fun reading it. I would recommend this anyone who's looking for a truly fun read, trying to take their mind off of the crazy and unfun world that we have right now. And anyone who likes ghosts, like her ghost scenes are also sometimes like I don't get creeped out by ghost scenes in books that much. I don't know, like I think in terms of getting scared, I'm a very visual person. But sometimes like some of the things she writes are truly creepy. I'm like, yeah, I could see how that would be creepy and why the characters are creeped out right now. The next book I read, and like I said, I read a lot of obscure books, and this one is definitely up there with the obscurity. But it's called 9 Lives by Aimen. I think that's how you pronounce it, Aimen Dean, and this is again a nonfiction book. I like reading a lot of nonfiction. Not all of the books on this channel will be nonfiction, because I know not everyone is jazzed about nonfiction like I am. But basically, this is, again, a true story. The author is the main person in the story. It starts when he's about 15, and he is from, I think he grew up in Saudi Arabia, but his family's from Bahrain, and it basically starts when he become a jihadi, basically. He joins Al-Qaeda, and he is in Al-Qaeda for several years. I mean, obviously, he's really young when he joins. He's 15. And by the time, I think it's when he's like 18 or 19, he decides he actually doesn't like bombing civilians. He didn't ever personally bomb civilians, I don't think. But after Al-Qaeda did bomb some civilians in the embassy's attacks, he decided that wasn't aligned with his personal beliefs, killing innocent civilians, and he ends up becoming a spy for the British government within Al-Qaeda, and he was one of the top spies inside Al-Qaeda for like, I think it was like 7 or 8 years or something like that, until his cover is blown and he basically has to just go live a normal life, like in hiding, although I guess like not very much in hiding, because he now wrote a book. I mean, I guess from the time his cover is blown, it's been over a decade, but it's for the most part a really good book. It's a memoir, so you can never quite know if he's downplaying certain things or overplaying other things. That's the issue with memoirs, but it still does a good job of giving you a history of Al-Qaeda from the mid-90s through the 2000s. And I would say I wouldn't read this if you don't have any background at all on like the war on terrorism or Al-Qaeda or the Iraq War or anything like that. I do think you need a little bit of background going in, because sometimes he just mentions things and he doesn't explain it. So if you do have a background in this, I think this is really good at enhancing your knowledge and giving it kind of a personal touch. The next book is the book I'm actually currently reading, and this one is a cult classic, for sure. In Cold Blood by Truman. Is it Capote? I don't know. I'm so bad at pronouncing things. In Cold Blood is again, it's a true story, so nonfiction, but he writes it as if it is fiction, to kind of like really make you feel like you're there and you're in the crime and you're in the community that the crime was committed. And basically it takes place in 1959. and is about the murder of 4 members of a family that was just very random, and no one understands why they did it, like why it happened and who did it, and they don't find out for like 6 weeks, and then it turns out it was just these 2 random guys who thought that they had, like, the family had it safe, and then the family didn't, and then they killed the whole family. That's not like a spoiler because this book is really well known, the killings are really well known, and it's more about like trying to explore human nature and like why did they do it? Like, why did they randomly kill this family? And why did the community react how they did? And, you know, the fear that the community had after it's done, and kind of the shattering of that American pastoral life that they had. There's been some parts that have just been really descriptive and good, and I can really get in to know the emotions of the character. And it's also an interesting piece of work of investigative journalism. Fun fact, upon reading it, Harper Lee helped gather information for this book. I love Harper Lee. She shows up in odd places, I feel like. Now, the last book I'm going to go over is a book I have read before. I read it a year and a half ago. I honestly don't remember, and I'm just rereading it because when I read it, I absolutely loved it, and it's The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender. I got this book for Christmas because I asked for it, because I remember I absolutely loved it. I read it in like a day when I first read it. It was just, it made my soul sing. I adored this book, and I was really hesitant to read it at first, and it had been on my to-read list for like a while because people kept recommending it, but it's a book that's really hard to explain what it's about. So whenever someone would explain it, they would say it's an amazing book. It, you know, it had a deep effect on me. It's one of those books. But when they would explain what it was about, it was always really vague, and I didn't get what was appealing about it. And then I finally decided to read it and take a chance on it, and it was beautiful, and I understand why it's hard to describe it. It's like a magical realism book, and I feel like those books are always hard to describe what's fantastic about them. It's basically the history of the Lavender family, and it's just a beautiful book. I know this is, again, a very vague description because it's just hard to describe this book, but it's wonderful. I do recommend this to anyone who loves like magical realism and just like wondrous and kind of like a real life fairy tale, but like twisted because the world, as we all know, is kind of awful sometimes. And yeah, but it's still beautiful, and I think that's what's great about this book, is that it shows that sometimes awful things happen, but there's still beautiful and sparkly and wondrous things about life. So just to end on the books that I have read before, I recommend this, and it will probably help make you feel better, if not distract you for a whole day from what's happening outside. So if you guys have any requests about a book you would like me to review, or anything else you would like to see, like a tour of my bookshelf, just comment down below, like the video, share the video, tell your other book loving friends that I'm doing this, and let's ride out this quarantine together.